Hi, welcome to Holidazzle and sharing with us today on our tutorial. My name's Yua,
And I'm Juan.
and we are their daughter, Restless daughter. Um, I began this business probably about 4, 5, 6 years ago, and officially, we'll say 4, but I was at a event one night, and my friend's like, "You should sell some of your crafty stuff." I'm like, "I don't have any crafty stuff." So it was that same year that um, I had started making cross stitches to give to friends for cheap Christmas gifts. And little did I know that it would turn into something so prolific and something bigger than what it was. So I started selling cross stitches at the Varsity Theater in or Dinkytown, and pretty soon it got too busy. So Juan joined in the business with me, and we've kind of built it to what we do now. We're a duo of 2 sisters that use techniques taught to us by our mom and brought down to her by our grandmother. So.
Yeah, so what is cross stitch? So cross stitch is it's a needlepoint, as similar to there's embroidery that's also out there that you could do, but cross stitches is in a way where when you do your stitching on the fabric, it creates little X's. So that's kind of the meaning why it's called cross and a stitch. So
it's not that you're mad when you're doing it. No, you're not cross.
So with what you and I do is we take like that traditional form of the cross stitch where it's like the pretty flowers, the very traditional, heads or animals or words and stuff and lettering, but we twist it in a way where it becomes a little bit more snarky, a little bit more subversive, and sarcastic, basically. We infuse like our humor, we infuse pop culture in what we do. But so today what we're going to show you is how to create one of our kits that we have created for Holidazzle. It's called 3 Goals. So it's a play on Pac-Man, and it says, "Tonight you will be visited by 3 goals." We do have these kits available at Minneapolis Craft Market's website. Yua at the end will also repeat where you can get these kits and some of our other fabulous like cross stitches that we do. So let's start off with the fabric. So with most traditional cross stitches, they use Aida fabric. You can expand to use, Muslim and any other type. So there's different ways to experiment with it. But we do have what we have the Aida fabric, and what it is a fabric that's got little holes in it, and they look like little squares, or it's like in a way in a grid. The sizes of the fabric depends on, because there's different count of the sizes. The one that we are using is it's a 14 count. No, it's an 11 count. It goes up to a 14 count. So the reason why the sizes are a little bit different is because the higher the count, the smaller the hole, and your smallest the squares that you have in here. So that's why we use a little bit slightly bigger one, because so you can definitely see it better. But so we use the 11 count fabric for here. So the other thing is we do use thread, and there's different types of threads out there. We do use a DMC thread, which is very similar. They're all very much the same. It just might be slightly a little bit different in the texture of it, but that's what we use when we do our cross stitching. So, and then it comes in a wide range of colors. You can play around, and there's, I would say, probably over 100 colors that you can choose from too. So that's another great part about the coloration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to start the cross stitch. So usually in our kits, what we do have is we have a pattern, and then we also have just basic instructions in the kit. So very simple, very easy to follow. When you have a pattern, it usually comes with the colors gridded out, and then also what it is, and then the colors will be broken down to tell you what colors you would use in it, and then every little square is an X. So that is the pattern that you would use. So to start, you would take your fabric, and traditionally, most people do use embroidery, or they use the embroidery hoop to use with it, because it helps stabilize the fabric a little bit better. It helps you, not get the fabric as dirty, being that this is a white fabric. I would always recommend periodically washing your hands as you're doing it, just because, as everybody, your hands do build up oil, and then to reduce that oil that will go on the fabric as you're working. So the first step is finding the center of your fabric. So what you would do, there's different methods to do. There's one method where you can actually fold your fabric, and you fold in half, and then you just figure out where that center is. And that's where you would usually start your fabric. Your pattern is you start from the center, which is indicated on the pattern, and that's where you would build out from. So that is one way of doing it. Another trick that I have is being that I don't always like the creases by folding, I slightly fold it and I run just a thread through, and then I fold the other way and I run a thread through, and that shows me where my center is. So that is one way of doing it, and I find that is easier for me than to actually fold it. So when you are using embroidery hoop, there's a little square on top. Just unscrew the square. That will loosen the inner circle. And then I'm going to do this vertically versus down. Usually you'll set it down with this on top, the fabric in the center, and the bottom one and the bottom. But I'm going to do it upwards, so it might not look like it's fully being centered. So this is what it's going to look like. And then you would press it down, and then just kind of get it to set in the center. When you're actually doing it on the table, with that center that I made for it, you will center it better, but doing it up is a little bit harder. So what you would do is you get it down, and then you would just, as soon as you get the fabric in, the inner circle on the bottom, and then get them even, you just want to tighten the top. So this is actually what it would look like when you are completed and then you are ready to start. I would say maybe if you want, wash your hand again, but then your pattern is ready for you to start working on it.
And you would move the fabric as needed, take it out, unscrew it, and move it as needed as you're working along the pattern. Okay. So I'm going to show how to do thread, and the DMC floss that we use I really like because a lot of it is colorful, but also it holds kind of this gloss on it, so it looks excuse me, it has a better presentation than full than other threads that we've used. Juan's going to hold this up as a background for me. So regular thread is going to be it's going to come in a little packet. Do you have? Okay. So what you want to do though is pull out one piece first, and I like to do probably just 2.5 feet. Don't do it any longer than that because you will it will knot too much, and I feel like that's frustrating. Even when I do it now, it knots way too much, and I feel like I spend more of my time on knotting thread than I am actually cross stitching. And each piece is, you're not going to be able to see this, but each piece will have 6 skeins, and I like, you can use up to 6, but at the same time just be aware that the holes are going to be excuse me, the holes are not going to fit all 6 pieces. So you want to separate what you however you want the pattern to look. If you want it to be more full, you can use up to 4 threads. For all of our work we use 2 because we pull it way too much and the thread becomes threadbare, so you have to be aware of that too. So I always pull 2 from the 1 thread. It'll always come in 6 for that. So with the 2 excuse me, 2 you use that, but I'm going to show you for how to with this piece of yarn. So pretend this is a single skein. And what you want to do is just one skein, you want to take it and meet the two pieces together so you have a loop. And this is how you're going to start your thread. You have a loop on the bottom and the two loose ends on the top. So what you do is take the two loose ends and you're going to thread that through the eye of the needle. And I'm not going to show it here. I do have a finished one, but this will be that's how you'll start. So the two loose ends, this would be the eye of the needle, and you have a looped end and the two loose ends right here. And so this is what it looks like right here. Here's the eye. And so this helps you not have to knot the beginning of any cross stitching, because you want the back to look nice too. You don't want to have too huge of knots in the back. And this is this is going to be your grid of the squares. So these are your holes. So it's going to be kitty corner to each other, and where you want to start is where you want to go in and back through. Okay, so what you're seeing now is the back of the thread. You're going to pull it almost all the way through, and then here's where you loop. So that's how you start. And so this is what the front should look like. And then you want to go back through and back in again. And that's how you show your X, okay? And then back through again and up to create the X. Sorry, it's kind of hard to figure out where that is. And then back. And then back again. So that's how you're going to read your, that's how you're going to do your patterns. And it really doesn't matter like what corner you start in. It's just make sure that you're overlapping. Sorry, my overlapping is not correct here, but your overlapping can either go one way or the other. It also depends if you're right-handed or left-handed, but like you all want your X's to be, if this part overlaps, you want this part to overlap too.
And there's not a right way or a wrong way to which one you start out with, because we actually both stitch differently. So sometimes when we have to help complete each other's cross stitches, we have to make sure, and it's always a little weird when I have to finish her cross stitch because I go the opposite way than she does. So.
And I'm going to show you backstitching is, I'm going to just X this out.
In the pattern that we have, and you see this quite a bit, is with some of the letterings that you do, it does use the form of a backstitching. So backstitching is basically like creating just lines, whether it's vertical, horizontal, diagonal, but it's not actually creating the X for it. So again, a lot of words that sometimes I use does use that backstitch style.
Yeah, backstitching is just a little bit easier than cross stitching because it takes up a lot less time. The needles that we included in the kit are actually embroidery needles and not cross stitch needles. I like embroidery needles better just because they're the tips are pointy, and you can use that to, if you make any mistakes, you can use that to undo any stitches that you do. And that's super helpful.
Yeah, and don't worry as you're doing this, if you're a beginner at doing cross stitches, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to look a mess in the back. It's going to take you a long time, but don't worry, because it's, we've been doing it for 6 years, so we do it a lot faster. We do a lot of repetition and stuff. So it's when if you were to ask us, it's time-wise, it's not going to be the same as what a beginner would. So, but over time, it's going to be, it's just going to take time.
A few tips that I I want to give that when you're cross stitching is put on a movie or put on a podcast that you really like or a radio station and just have something on in the background. You're probably not going to be able to watch too much, but it's just a lot funner to have something kind of stimulate your mind while you're doing something with your hands. One thing I also want to remind everybody who's doing cross stitches is when you're starting out, pick something small and pick something easy because that helps you finish, and that helps to push you forward to be like, oh, I finished one thing versus having a huge project that takes years and years to do. It's just really exciting to be like, I made this thing with my hands. Okay, so I'm going to show backstitching real quick. I'm going to show the loop method again. So this is the back that you see. In, out, and let's see, loop, through, pull. So that's the back. Backstitching is basically a line. If you want to do up, it'll be like this, and then back in again to create that stitch. And then it could also be angled to form a letter. So obviously this is not a letter, but if you need to do any angles, you could do that too.
Okay, so you're done with your cross stitch. You've worked on it for hours. It looks beautiful.
Oh wait,
sorry.
I'm going to show you how to, or I'm going to talk real quick about just finishing one thread. So you're at the end of the thread. To finish it is just on the back of it, just run it through a couple of the, so you're going to have this on the back. Just run your needle through the back of a couple of these stitches and then just snip it. It will hold in place. I usually run it through at least 3 so that holds it secure and that you actually don't need to tie any knots on the back.
Okay, so you finished it. So this is not the finished piece, but it kind of gives you an idea of it being worked on in progress. And as you're working on with the hoop, usually you go up and down. You just have to find your squares, and then you will go up your other hole, up. So let's pretend that I'm done. Let's pretend that this piece is done and I'm ready to complete it, frame it. There's different ways of doing this. If you find that your piece is not too dirty because you've been washing your hand throughout the whole process, you don't have to wash it, but there is also a recommendation from that I know of that, people do say you can wash it, and it is safe to wash, but you just have to be gentle with it. So take the piece off of, your hoop, and then take your fabric and soak it in lukewarm water with a small amount of mild washing liquid. Just agitate it, let it soak for about 15 minutes, let it agitate just slightly. You don't rub it, don't scrub at it, because that will ruin it, but just let it, just kind of let it sit, agitate it in it, and then rinse it out underneath warm water until it's done. When you're done with that, put your work on a piece of clean white cloth, smooth out those wrinkles, kind of roll it, and then squeeze the excess water off. Don't fold it, because if you fold it when it's wet, especially, and as it's starting to dry, it's going to create more creases that are in there that that you don't want. So then what you would do is place the fabric down, place another clean towel, or you could use an ironing cloth on top of it, and then use medium heat, and then kind of just like a normal oven, press it until it's mostly dry. You want to double check it, because like most fabric, when it's wet and you're drying it, sometimes it might stretch out, or the lines might get a little bit, it might not stretch out correctly, because that's what happens to fabric. You just want to tug in some of the corners, the opposite corners and stuff, just to move kind of the stitching back in place. If you don't wash it because is what most of the stuff we do, because we don't always have to wash it, but then you have those creases in there and you're trying to iron it, it doesn't come out. What you can do is just take a little bit of warm water, spray the fabric, and then you can still iron it with ironing cloth, and that would help get the creases out of your work. So
one of my biggest pet peeves is seeing pieces online that are not ironed.
One thing, when you are done, so let's say that, and then you have to go back to that first step that you did of putting it back in the hoop. So centering it, laying it on the table, so let's pretend this is complete. This is my fabric. You'll still have, the edging around it. So what you want to do is you want to trim it. You want to take a fabric scissor and cut maybe about, I would say, 1/2 inch to 1 inch, depending on what you do, because there's 2 methods of how to finish it. I hot glue mine, which works well, but if you don't hot glue it, there's a method where I would say leave that longer edging, because you run a thread through that edging and you pull it and it pulls all the fabric back. An easier way to do it, which also works very well, is to hot glue it. So that's why I said 1/2 inch. So I trim it to about that 1/2 inch, and then once you trim it, you fold the fabric in, you kind of hot glue it in place, and then you just fold it, press it down, fold it, press it down on it. And then that will pull your fabric underneath it. If you didn't use that method and you use the string method, your back might look more like this, which both methods work well. It's just whatever your skill level is. So you have that done. You're ready to, because now you can see the back of it, you want to clean it up. So in our kits, we do offer like a felt backing that you can cut out, and this with the circle. So you will cut out that felt and have the circle. Then you'll place it on. I take pins and I set a pin, and I pin it all the way across and around the outside of it. And then that way it's set, it's ready to go, it's in place. And then there's 2 methods that you could use for this. There is the blanket stitch, which is a little bit harder to do. So I just use the whip stitch. And whip stitch is basically catching a fabric of the Aida fabric and catching the felt, and then just running a stitch, pull it out. Another stitch, pull it out, another stitch. And it's much cleaner. It's clean too, so you'll see the stitching right around it. You could do 1 or 2 things. You could use the same color fabric or same color thread to match your fabric. That's fine. I think it's very interesting when you use a contrasting thread too. That also really works really well. And then you have your finished piece. So here it is. The back looks really clean. You can add a little string, make it an ornament, or else you could just keep it this way too. And that is how to make a cross stitch.
So our socials, you can find us at 3drcrafts.com. That's our website, or else our social media is at 3drcrafts for Instagram, and same for Facebook as well. And if you want to buy the kit, you can go to the Minneapolis Craft Market site and you can find any there. So
yeah, so thanks for joining us today. Again, I'm Juan and this is Yua, and we're at Third Daughter, Restless Daughter, and we hope to see you guys soon.
thanks.